Ted in Sunnyvale, California. Hey, Ted, thanks for watching us on YouTube. You wanted to comment about common carriers, the FCC, that sort of thing?
Yeah. I suspect I know why the FCC doesn't want to go down the common carrier, and it might be for a much more pragmatic reason. In the early days in phone technology, the phone lines were limited to something like 2,300 kilohertz, which is, when they digitized it, 56 kilobits per second.
Right.
So everybody had the same level of service.
Right.
Corporations can tie PBXs together with something called a T1 line, which was intended to be 56 kilobit per second times 23 voice channels.
Right.
That's how corporations had tie lines to avoid long-distance phone charges. Even when you look at broadcast TV, not until HD TV came along, the standard of quality was exactly the same. So here's the question. If the FCC was to declare the Internet providers a common carrier, define common in terms of quality. I think that's the next question that they would have to approach, and they don't want to go down that path.
Well, here's where common actually becomes defined. There would be two thresholds, two potential bottlenecks. The first would be, and in the United States it's the exclusive one, the first would be the capacity of that company to provide data to you at a particular speed, and your willingness to pay for it, presumably. So your ISP may have the ability to provide you with 10 MIPS up and 100 MIPS down, and or 100 and 500 or whatever it may be, or they could negotiate with you as we do. I mean, if my home internet is considerably slower than my internet here at work because we pay for much more bandwidth here at the radio studio, and so there's that bottleneck. But the other bottleneck, which exists in South Korea and in most European countries, would be if that bottleneck could be, and in most cases would be, a mechanical bottleneck. Basically, the capacity of the equipment to handle data. The secondary bottleneck would be which internet service provider you choose. In France, for example, where you can, for $35 a month, get 100 MIP high-speed internet, and plus your telephone service and free calls to, I think it's 29 countries, plus 100 plus channels of cable television, all for $35 a month. The reason for that is because whoever brings the wire into your house or the fiber into your house, they charge a certain amount for that, and they make a small profit on that. So they charge like $11 a month to bring that into your house. And then you go out and you shop for an internet service provider, for a phone company, and for a cable TV company. And you have, dozens of them, and in the case of internet service providers, more than 100 of them competing with each other in France and in South Korea. And I believe this is the case in Japan. You have a bunch of different companies competing with each other to provide that to you, and different ones will have different capacities in terms of their ability to deliver to and through a backbone and to and through your physical internet service provider in your physical area. So, for example, when I lived in Vermont and we had a law like this that had to do with telephone carriers, Verizon found itself having to rent its telephone lines to Sovereignnet, which was Vermont used to be a sovereign nation before it joined the country, so everybody likes to use the word sovereignty up there. So it was the Sovereignnet, the Sovereign Vermont Net, and Sovereignnet.com. I think they're still in business. And they, for $25 a month, Verizon was charging something like $30 a month for residential telephone service, plus this, plus that, plus this, plus that, plus if you wanted somebody to come out and see you at your house, you had to make an appointment 3 days in advance. And Sovereignnet said, we're just going to serve a small area in Vermont, and the service guy will live 6 blocks down the road from you, and it's $25 a month flat rate. And we were Sovereignnet customers for a long time. And in fact, all the lines coming in for our callers on this show, and we used to do our show out of the living room of our house, which is where we started this program 10 years ago, we're on Sovereignnet. And if I had a problem with anything other than the copper, the Sovereignnet guy, and sometimes the copper that was inside my house, the SovereignNet guy literally lived 2 blocks away from me, and he would walk over to our house. He helped us wire our first what's called a hybrid. It's the system that allows me to put callers on the air. And so am I making sense?
Yeah, you are. And I remember I lived in England for a short time, and British Telecom had to do the same thing. They had to basically lease their wires to local providers.
Based on the customer's preference.
Right, and they would provide the last mile service.
Right.
Actually, I think that would work here in the U.S., but trying to change this huge industry into that level of
well, that's how it used to be. That's how it used to be. I mean, I back in the 80s, I used to run forums on CompuServe. In fact, I made a pretty good living doing it, and along with a bunch of other people who worked with me, who are still working with me, Nigel and Sue and a bunch of other people. Several of them are still working with me, and basically, you accessed CompuServe over your telephone line. It was dial-up service, and you could choose between CompuServe or AOL as your internet service provider, basically. And AOL, carpet bombed the world with free disks, and everybody joined AOL. And CompuServe got acquired by H&R Block, which decided to simply suck them dry and take all their profits. And CompuServe went out of business, and AOL is still around.
Yeah, my only issue though is I don't think the FCC or even Congress is going to be able to turn the clock back and go back to those type of arrangements. I
agree. That's why I'm saying today. That's why I'm saying this is the biggest news story of the day, because the FCC is not going to change it because their chairman Tom Wheeler made $19 million as a lobbyist, first for the telephone companies and then for the internet companies, and he's now the fox in charge of the chicken coop. He's not going to change it.
So here's one other question. Suppose I don't know if this can be done with the common carrier rules, but suppose that the last mile connection is negotiable between the service provider, would be Comcast or Time Warner or whoever it is, and the customer. But once it's in their network, they have to take a hands-off attitude.
Well,
so that my access to Xfinity and my access to Netflix would be exactly the same.
Well, then you're talking net neutrality. I mean, that's basically net neutrality, because right now they're claiming the ability to inspect what's coming in. They're making the deal with Netflix. Eventually, they're going to come to you and me and say, we want to also be able to inspect what's going out. And I'm confident that that's the case, because I know right now when I use a virtual private network, they cut my speed. So they're getting ready for it. Ted, I'm out of time, but thank you for the call.
You're listening to the Thom Hartmann Program. Visit ThomHartmann.com for audio and video archives. And
that's why I think that isn't going to happen. You're going to see tiered pricing for internet access. Oh, you want basic access? Oh, you want streaming video? Oh, you want the porn channel? Oh, you want the news channel? Extra price, please.